So I'm Paul Drew from Metaswitch. I'm going to talk to you about an example of open source telecom used at Manx Telecom. Unfortunately, Kevin Page, the CTO of Manx Telecom, he's not able to join us today. He's had a family crisis, so you're just going to have to listen to me for the next 20 minutes, I'm afraid. So, who's Manx Telecom and what was the project we've been involved with? It was a virtual IMS replacement project with Manx Telecom. Manx Telecom's based in the Isle of Man. As Alan said, he grew up there. It's an island off of the UK in the Irish Sea. They're an independent operator listed on London AIM. They were originally owned by BT, then O2 Telefonica, private equity, so they've been through a few different ownerships, but now they're independent in the Isle of Man. They offer a full range of fixed line, mobile, broadband, data hosting, managed services, both to consumers and businesses, and they're an innovative player. They were the first European 3G network, and they've now got 4G rolled out to 99% of their population on the Isle of Man. They were an early adopter of IMS, one of the first carriers to actually transform their fixed line network to be IMS-based, and they're now looking to do the same with both virtualization and open source, and this is the project that I'm going to tell you about. They're also a big business. They're involved with, they've got lots of data centers on the Isle of Man, e-gaming, financial services in particular, and there are some regulatory reasons around that. I'll explain in just a second. So the project we've been involved with Metaswitch and Manx Telecom is replacing an EOL IMS core. And Manx Telecom were faced with a EOL event, end-of-life hardware, and needed to determine a path forward. And what they chose to do was they used the solution from Metaswitch, the fixed line IMS solution, which is based on our Project Clearwater, our open source IMS core, and then we built around it our telephony application server, our access gateway controller, and our SBC. It's a fully virtual deployment. It's spread across geo-redundant across 2 data centers. Now, the Isle of Man is quite small, so the data centers are relatively close together, but it is fully geo-redundant. So, where's the Isle of Man? Who knows anything about it? Okay, it's it's in the Irish Sea. There's about 86,000 people live on the Isle of Man, so it's relatively small, but it's best known for the Isle of Man TT race. And in that week, an extra 40,000 people go to the Isle of Man. I've never been to it. I've been to the Isle of Man, but not to TT. But it is a big event. It is actually unusual. It is not in the EU, and that is one of the reasons why they are a data center hosting for both financial services and e-gaming, because they can provide their own regulations. But it is a UK Crown dependency, so it's an unusual kind of half in, half out of the UK territory. Channel Islands are somewhat similar. So, what was the project we were involved with? This essentially shows the network architecture. In the core of the network is the IMS core, and this is the Metaswitch Project Clearwater IMS core platform. We then had to integrate that in with both a number of existing elements in their network and new ones that were deployed as part of the network replacement. So, going around, there was a business TAS, a residential TAS, offering both business services and residential services. The residential TAS is all where we're doing the migration across. Billing platforms, HSS for all your data store, voicemail, connections into the outside world with SS7, ISUP, the MGCF, MGW, SIP trunking interconnect as well, the SBC, and access gateways. They've got MSANs in their network they've got POT lines, they've got SBCs for SIP-based CPE, mostly for business services, but some for residential, and access gateways into PBX. So it's a complete network for fixed line infrastructure, and they've had to replace large portions of this network, particularly the IMS core, which went end of life. What was the project timeline look like, and how did it actually work out? So we initially did a proof of concept. That was last year, ran for 6 months, building it into their data center on virtual infrastructure based on VMware, and proved that it could work. This was a bit of a leap of faith from Manx Telecom. They had no virtualized telco infrastructure in their network at this point. And once we showed it was working, we connected into some of their test network, showed live service through the network. They went ahead, kicked the project off, and that started in January this year. So initially, we were using the proof of concept system to do integration testing, and then the production deployments kicked off in January, and the virtualization deployments deployed in January and February. This was based on Cisco hardware and VMware as a virtualization environment, and then the integration testing switched across to use the production network and moved that across. We then Metaswitch went through a phase of install and commissioning, which lasted through February till April. And then after that, further integration, acceptance testing, verifying the billing, verifying that services match what they got on the network. This is a network transformation, and customers don't expect their network service to change. So it is tricky. And now migrations have just kicked off. In fact, they've just kicked off this week, and the first customers are now up and live on the system. So overall, it's taken about 10 months to get from the point of kicking off the production deployment to migrations, and they're aimed to be complete by Christmas, and the end-of-life platform can then be retired. So, Isle of Man is famous for the TT racing. They race around the streets. Things go well. You see the races going around. It's good. What went well in this project? So, we had a very collaborative engagement between Metaswitch and Manx Telecom. Metaswitch had a lot of people on site, and that was successful for a period of probably 3 to 4 months on-site support. We had weekly management calls, and actually the teams gelled together and worked well. And the voice design stood up well. Like, we put a lot of effort up front to figure out what needed to happen with the voice design, and that was successful. It stood the test of time. That is what's been deployed and is now live in the network 10 months later. Other things that went well. So Project Clearwater, this was one of the early deployments for Project Clearwater as a live production network. And it's in a virtualized environment, and it's just performed well. It's performed well in testing and proven that open source products actually work in real networks. So that has been very successful for us. And from a Manx Telecom point of view, they have shown that they are really getting the business case benefits out of both NFV and STN. And they've reduced their investment and their operational costs. They have a significantly faster time to market. The previous time that they went to deploy an IMS into their network, the one that's now end of life, it took them 6 years from kicking off the project to getting the subscribers migrated off their previous legacy Class 5 switch. So this is massively faster than what it is before, and it's simplified their ongoing platform management. So that's been a great success for both Metaswitch as a company and Manx Telecom. What's not gone so well? So people crash in TT quite often, unfortunately. We've had some challenges in this project. So one of the probably most tricky things is square peg in a round hole. IMS in the real world, particularly the Manx IMS network, it didn't always follow the specs. It was an early deployment of IMS, and they had to continue to run the existing network in parallel while all the testing and migration works. And this means things like you can't turn off the proprietary authentication on your HSS. You have to keep running that, and it meant that we had to do development work to support the non-standard IMS existing in the Manx network. We also had to look at the end-to-end solution. Making sure the end-to-end solution worked was key to this. And originally, we were just looking at deploying the sort of virtual IMS core software, but we had to look wider than that and make sure that the model worked across the board. And there was a bit of a mind change, this was Manx Telecom's point of view, that Metaswitch as an organization, we had to look wider rather than just saying these core bits work, it's your problem to make the rest of it work. We had to make it all work across the board and work collaboratively with Manx to get their existing components working with all the new pieces. We also had to, as I said before, we had various custom features that were in their network up till now, and we had to do development to match existing function. And some of this dates back for a long legacy. This is a fixed line network that people have been having fixed line service in the Isle of Man for over 100 years. And you end up with a lot of features in there, and some of them are fairly niche ones, and there was some custom function we needed to put in to match what was in their network today. We also had complicated SIP issues. The telephony application server for residential services was not trivial, and there were SIP issues that were quite complicated we had to work through and fit together. And then I mentioned before the HSS, non-standard authentication, again, custom development to match existing function, and this was where it came in that having our open source IMS platform, we were able to be fast and agile and fix things that we found in the network and keep the project on track. What else we see challenges with? So using like platform as a service for telco, the virtualized platform, it did not initially behave as expected. And when it came down to it, we had problems with resiliency. The resiliency of the virtual platform running virtual machines on VM servers across multiple Cisco hardware platforms in a geo-redundant center was actually difficult. It was more complicated than had been realized, and it required a mindset change for people who are used to virtual networking. If you just take a bunch of servers and plug them into Ethernet switches or routers, it's a mindset shift if you go to the virtualization model. And the technology is evolving rapidly here. So there has been a big shift. It's had to make Manx Telecom, they have had to change their mindset. And their telco guys didn't get virtualization. They had to bring in their IT and cloud team to really help get this project off the ground. And Manx Telecom have got a very strong IT cloud team because they've got these data centers. They've been offering services to the like e-gaming and the financial services, but they'd worked in one silo and the telco guys in another silo, and they had to actually work together to make this project work. Now that the underlying platform is there, the telco guys are supporting the software applications moving forward, and that's successful, but there was a 2 or 3 month period in the middle of this where they were struggling with the virtual platform design, and it took a couple of redesigns to get it to work and get the resiliency that was wanted when they did redundancy testing, pulled cables out, switched servers off, turned links down, etc. But they have got to that point where it works now. Okay, so if I look at it, that was from the sort of the Manx point of view. Well, how did it go from Metaswitch as a vendor? So what did we see? So this was an early deployment of Clearwater with open source software, and we did see some teasing issues, but it works well. We've not seen very many problems, and it's been fine for like the end of the acceptance testing. The migrations have kicked off. We're not seeing technical issues here. So open source software is working in the network in a live environment. IMS in the real world, it has required flexibility and agility to address the issues found in testing. IMS does not follow the standards when you really look under the covers, and that has required us to be flexible and develop things, but it can be deployed in a multi-vendor environment. Virtualization, again, separating the hardware and the virtualization layer from applications. Like, the biggest challenge has been around networking. This is one of the early deployments of a significant virtual network NFV deployment of a fixed line network, and it does work, but it has been difficult, and there's been more challenges there than we necessarily expected. And the timelines have been challenging. They had an end-of-life event. Some of the issues have caused delays. There's been quite a lot of stress in making this project actually work on time, but we have reached the migration phase, the final hurdle, after 10 months. So overall, we've got to the end game and done what we've needed to do. And fundamentally, Manx has been a great customer to work with from Metaswitch perspective. So it's been a really good project from us. Finally, I'll just finish up very quickly, just a quick thing who Metaswitch is. We've been around for 30 years, about 650 employees, headquartered in London, offices in the US, San Francisco, about 1,000 global service providers, privately held company, and we've done a lot of work in NFV and SDN. For example, we recognize as AT&T Domain 2.0 vendor. And the project we use behind this, Project Clearwater, which is our open source IMS cloud. This was basically a massively scalable, low-cost IMS platform. It was designed from the ground up to leverage the cloud. So we took existing open source technology like Cassandra as a database, open standard APIs, and built a platform to run in the cloud with business model innovation. Excellent. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the audience? My comment here is this is a great example of the power of open source. You just think of the time and effort it would have taken with a closed source IMS solution, and it would be very scary. Gregors.
Hi. T-Mobile Poland is, I suppose, a much more bigger operator than your client, but the question is what was the, let's say, selling point? How you get the decision that they are going to go with this, with your solution?
Okay, so there are a number of key events that persuaded Manx Telecom to select Metaswitch as a vendor. Flexibility. Manx was very keen on doing something in a virtualized environment. They want to be both seen as a leader in that space, and also their business case showed that they would make gains out of running on standard hardware in a virtualized environment. They were coming from an environment where their previous platform, the hardware had been end-of-lifed. They did not want to get locked into another cycle where they bought a proprietary hardware platform with a 6 or 8 or 10 year life cycle, and then they'd have to replace the network again in that time frame. So they were very keen to move to a virtual platform with common off-the-shelf hardware. They were very comfortable with the concept of running services in a data center because that's a key part of their business, and they want to migrate and merge their network so that they're running all their services essentially out of their data centers. And they said, why are we offering services to this e-gaming site in our cloud that we're hosting, and we've got all this proprietary hardware we're running for our voice service? So it doesn't make any sense to us. So they were very keen on virtualization and moving forward, and we could offer the best solution on the virtualization platform there, and able to offer a low-cost and flexible solution to them as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.